Welcome to What the Comp, the Pay Strategy Podcast, where compensation stops being confusing and starts making sense for real organizations. I'm Jennifer Loftus, National Director at Astron Solutions. And today we're talking about performance-based pay and why so many organizations believe they're rewarding performance when in reality, they're often rewarding consistency. Here's the truth. Most performance pay systems don't actually differentiate performance very well. They distribute increases. They preserve relationships. They keep things moving. They avoid disruption. But they don't always create a clear connection between performance and pay. And that matters because performance-based pay is supposed to send a message. It's supposed to tell employees this is what matters. This is what great work looks like. This is how contribution is recognized. This is how performance affects opportunity. But in many organizations, that message gets blurry. The intent is performance, but the outcome is sameness. Employees receive similar increases. Managers avoid hard distinctions. High performers don't feel meaningfully recognized, and lower performers don't feel meaningful consequences. And eventually, the organization starts calling something performance-based that employees experience as routine. And if you're in human resources or finance or leading a team right now, you've probably seen this happen. A merit cycle begins. Budgets are set. Performance ratings are finalized. Managers receive guidelines. Spreadsheets start circulating. And everyone says the same thing. We want to reward performance. But then the actual increases come through. 3%, 3.5%, 4%, maybe a little more for someone exceptional, maybe a little less for someone struggling. And when employees compare notes, or when managers try to explain the difference, the message falls apart because the difference between average and excellent is sometimes too small to feel real. And that creates frustration. High performers think, why am I doing more if the reward barely changes? Managers think, how am I supposed to motivate people with this? Finance thinks, we spent a lot of money. What changed? And human resources get stuck trying to defend a system that was designed to reward performance, but is operating more like a distribution exercise. So why does this happen? Why do performance pay systems so often fall short of actually rewarding performance? There are a few patterns we see over and over again. The first issue. Pay for performance often starts with a budget before it starts with a philosophy. The organization asks, how much do we have to spend? Before it asks, what are we trying to reward? And that changes everything. Because when the budget becomes the starting point, the system naturally becomes about allocation. How do we spread the money? How do we stay within limits? How do we make sure departments are treated consistently? How do we avoid surprises? Those are important questions, but they are not the same as performance questions. Performance questions sound different. What outcomes matter most? What behaviors should be reinforced? What level of contributions should stand apart? How much differentiation is meaningful enough for employees to notice? And what message should pay send about performance? If those questions are not answered first, the budget drives the strategy. And when the budget drives the strategy, pay for performance usually becomes cautious. The second issue, managers are often asked to differentiate performance without enough structure or support. Organizations tell managers, reward your best people, but they don't always define what best means. Is best meaning results, behaviors, skill growth, leadership impact, revenue, productivity, collaboration, customer outcomes, innovation? The questions and the list go on. And when those definitions are unclear, managers fill in the gaps themselves. One manager rewards effort. Another rewards results. One manager rewards visibility. Another rewards loyalty. One manager avoids conflict and rates everyone similarly. Another manager is strict and rates everyone low. And a third manager is lenient and rates everyone high, at the top of the range. And over time, pay for performance becomes less about performance and more about the manager making the decision. That's where inconsistency grows. The third issue, organizations often confuse pay for performance with performance management. Those two things are connected, but they are not the same. Performance management is about expectations, feedback, coaching, accountability, and development. Pay for performance is about how compensation responds to contribution. And if the performance management process is weak, the pay process inherits that weakness. If goals are vague, pay decisions become vague. If feedback is inconsistent, pay decisions become inconsistent. If ratings are inflated, pay differentiation disappears. If managers avoid difficult conversations, pay becomes the place where those avoided conversations show up. And that's a problem, because compensation should reinforce ongoing performance management. It should not be forced to fix it. The fourth issue, many organizations are afraid of meaningful differentiation. They want pay for performance, but they also want harmony. They want to reward top performers, but they don't want anyone to feel disappointed. They want accountability, but they don't want conflict. They want the system to feel fair, but they also want managers to have flexibility. And those goals can work together, but only if the organization is willing to make real choices. Because pay for performance requires differentiation. Not arbitrary differentiation, not favoritism, not surprises, but real, explainable, defensible differentiation. And when organizations avoid that, the system gets compressed. Increases cluster together. Messages get softened. Performance categories lose meaning. And employees learn that the safest expectation is that most people will land in the middle. The fifth issue, pay for performance is often evaluated by whether the process was completed, not whether it changed behavior. The cycle closes, the increases are processed, the letters go out, the first payroll is run, the budget is reconciled, everyone moves on. But the bigger question is rarely asked. Did this pay system actually reinforce the performance we need? Did top performers feel recognized? Did managers understand the decisions they made? Did employees understand the connection between their contribution and their compensation? Did the organization get a return on the money it invested? Because pay for performance is not just an administrative cycle, it's a communication tool. And when the message is unclear, the investment loses power. Here's the key point. Pay for performance only works when the organization is clear about what performance means and brave enough to reward it differently. So what do you do? Because pay for performance does not improve just because the organization has a merit matrix. It improves when the system, the managers, the budget, and the message all line up. So starting Monday, begin by clarifying what performance actually means in your organization. Not generally, specifically. What outcomes matter? What behaviors matter? What results should be rewarded? What contribution should stand apart? Because if performance is not clearly defined, pay for performance cannot be clearly delivered. Starting Monday, begin testing whether your pay differences are actually meaningful. Look at the spread between average performers and high performers. Is the difference large enough to send a message? Is it large enough for employees to feel? Is it large enough for managers to explain? Because if the difference is too small, the system technically may be differentiated, but not practically meaningful. Starting Monday, begin supporting managers before the pay cycle begins. Not after ratings are final. Not when spreadsheets are due. Before decisions are made. Train managers on the compensation philosophy. Give them decision criteria. Calibrate performance expectations. Help them understand how to explain pay decisions clearly. Because managers are the people employees hear from. If managers can't explain the system, employees will not trust it. Starting Monday, begin looking for patterns of sameness. Where are increases clustering? Where are ratings inflated? Where are managers avoiding differentiation? Where are those true high performers not being recognized meaningfully? Where are those lower performers still receiving increases that suggest everything's fine? Because sameness tells you something. It usually means the system is avoiding the hard part. Starting Monday, begin connecting pay for performance to business outcomes. What is the organization trying to accomplish? Growth, retention, productivity, service quality, innovation, financial discipline. Pay for performance should reinforce those priorities. Because if the pay system does not connect to business strategy, it becomes an annual transaction. And pay for performance should be, must be, more than that. So here's where we land. Pay for performance matters. The philosophy matters. The budget matters. The manager conversations matter. The employee experience matters. But the system only works when employees can see a real connection between performance and pay. Not a theoretical connection, a real one, a clear one that managers can explain, one that employees can understand, one that reinforces what the organization actually values. Because when performance pay rewards everyone almost the same way, it does not feel like performance pay. It feels like routine pay. And over time, that weakens trust. It weakens motivation. It weakens the message your organization is trying to send. If this is something your organization is working through, or if your merit cycle feels more like an allocation exercise than a performance conversation, you're not alone. We see this all the time. Organizations want to reward performance, but the system they're using was built to protect consistency. And if it's helpful, reach out, mention the episode. We genuinely love to hear what you're seeing, where the system is getting stuck, and what performance-based pay is actually rewarding inside your organization. Thanks for listening to What the Comp. If this made you think, please send it to someone who's trying to make performance pay actually feel like performance pay. Because if your system rewards consistency more than contribution, your employees will notice. This is What the Comp.